This is
Podcast Raleigh
with your hosts,
Ashton and Hayes.
60% of our graduating class left the country. What would life look like if I had stayed home? It certainly would not look like what it looks like for me here.
Welcome in to Podcast Raleigh. In this episode, we talk to Angela Salamanca, owner of Centro and Gallo Pelon in downtown Raleigh, as well as Ex Voto in the Durham Food Hall. Angela Salamanca came to the United States from Colombia when, like a lot of us, she wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do after high school. What she thought would be a temporary stay with family led to being a student at UNC and eventually a restaurant and small business owner. She tells us about the origin of Centro's Day of the Dead celebrations and how it led to so much more. And we also ask her what it's like being an immigrant in Raleigh and what the city can do to make it better. But of course, we started by finding out more of those details about what brought Angela to Raleigh.
So I graduated from high school 30 years ago. This is my 30-year high school reunion in Colombia happening in November. It's really exciting. But I graduated and then I applied for college and I didn't get in. And I think mom and dad were really concerned about what I was going to do. I didn't really have a lot of options. It was public university or no university. And I didn't get in, so I had 6 months to wait out for the next exam.
Oh, okay.
So I could reapply for the exam. And I had an uncle and an aunt that lived here. So they were making decisions about, hey, you should just go to the U.S., practice your English, work a little bit, and then come back in 6 months, reapply, and then we'll just pick back up. And I didn't know what Raleigh was. I mean, I graduated, just turned 17, and I was in love with this boy.
As we are, you know.
Yeah, at that age, which is part of the reason why I did not pass the exam. And I was like, what do you mean I'm like living? I don't want to leave. Like, I'll leave for 2 months. They're like, that's not an option. You go for 6 months, you'll come back. It's like, okay. So I left. I didn't really even know what I was getting myself into. And I don't think that they knew either. And at the time, you know, this was 1994, it was a landline. It was really expensive to call overseas. There was no cell phones, no email, no chat, no nothing. So our communication was really limited. So it was like, yeah, your uncle said, yes, go. And I got here and the situation was a little different, but I was like, okay, well, we're just going to make it work. And then I started working with them because they owned Dos Taquitos in North Raleigh. And there were a couple other teenagers that came with me that I didn't know were coming. And I think that when I started working, I was like, why am I going to go back home? I've always worked.
Okay.
But I think that at some point in those 6 months, I realized, first, I'm not living with my mom, and this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And second, I can make a living here. And out of making a living, I can help mom. So, and they couldn't tell me I had to go back, you know?
Yeah, how would they? Yeah.
No, there was no leverage there.
Send a letter? Yeah.
So I stayed, and it took me 10 years to go back home.
Wow.
For the first time.
Gosh, okay. I have a lot of questions following up from that. So you said you didn't know where Raleigh was. Were you familiar with North Carolina at all? And I asked that because I spent some time in Italy, and I remember always having to illustrate like New York, Miami, and then right in the middle where North Carolina is, because as much as it's important to us, it turns out it's not important globally the way that we sometimes think of it.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think that we had been to Miami at some point. I think Dad had brought us to Disney or something. So we kind of knew where that was. But yeah, I don't know that I was cognizant exactly of the placing of Raleigh. I mean, I didn't even know how to say it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm so grateful for this city. It's really been home for me.
How did your uncle get here initially? Had he been in Raleigh a long time? How did he find the area?
So I think that their way into the States was through Colorado.
Okay.
So I think they first came to Colorado to study, and then they were in Georgia, and then ended up here in Raleigh.
Wow.
But following business opportunities.
Having grown up here, I'm always excited when people choose Raleigh, like how that decision happens. So.
Yeah, my kids are not excited about this. They're like, of all the places in the United States you could have picked to come.
Yeah.
You
We
picked
need to
Raleigh.
talk to them. Hold on.
Yeah, I was there once, and then I left, and then I was like, "Oh, it's actually really good there."
17, 18, you know, they still got a lot to learn.
For sure.
So did you have any thought that you might work in restaurants or in food when you came? I presume your first job was working at the restaurant. You said that, right?
Yes, here was. In Colombia, I worked in a bakery
Okay.
and like in a cafe. So, you know, it was easy. It was something that came easy to me. I'm a person, you know, a people person. Like, it's okay. I don't know a stranger. So I think it was easy. And when your family owns a restaurant, you don't get a choice. Like you're either hosting, serving, busing, whatever you can do is what you do. So I still remember that first shift. I think it was like a Friday night. This is 1993. I think they had been open for 3 years, and it was bonkers in there. And they're like, okay, you guys are going to run food. I'm like, okay. I mean, and I had I would say a medium understanding of English at the time because I had gone to an English speaking school. But it's different in practice,
Yep.
and it's different with the accent.
In the American
and it's
South
different
in 1993.
in the fast pace of a restaurant. So they send us there, and I'm like standing in this kitchen, and all I see are these massive trays of fajitas and of, you know, like tons of food coming out. And I'm like, oh my God, like what is happening? And I would just like push myself against the wall, like, I don't know that we can do this. And just sure enough, by the end of the night, you know, it became a little bit more familiar, and I worked there for many years.
Wow. And so you mentioned that you felt like you could earn a living in Raleigh differently than you could back home. What was that about? That there just weren't opportunities, or that
Yeah, you know, I mean, mom was a single mother, and we grew up in Bogota, which is a hard city to grow up in. She really lived week to week, paycheck to paycheck. She was such a hustler, but she never finished school. So the jobs that she had were really basic. And where all of my school friends were going into private universities, I went to a private school because Dad paid for it. But when it came to university, there was not an offering. It was like, this is a really good university, it's public, you just need to get in. That seemed like the right next step. So I just, you know, it was the opportunity that I had, and then I kind of messed it up.
well, then you came here, though.
Yeah, I mean, it was totally meant to be.
Yeah.
When I think about it, I don't know that I could have ever afford the life and opportunity that I have here, there. Not just because, I mean, I think that through education, you get ahead. But Colombia is a very classist society, and it's who you know, how you get the jobs and how you get the opportunities. And I have some family that is done well, but I couldn't see it at the time, you know? I was like, I don't know that I literally could have the opportunities that I've had here, there. So
you are working in a restaurant. When did you go to, maybe this working in a restaurant or working in restaurants is something I'd like to do moving forward, not just a job to have that now that I've moved here? And when did that evolve into, actually, I think I'd like to run some restaurants?
Well, I've been here for 30 years. I've had 30 years to kind of like go up and down that whole, you know, like train of thought. I worked with him for a long time. And then at some point, everybody's like, are you not going to study? You should probably study. So I started taking classes at Wake Tech. And I would work and I would take 1 class, 2 classes. Eventually, I finished my associates there. And I was thinking maybe I'll move to New York. I really, you know, like I love a big city. I was a big city person. So I was there for summer and realized that it was really hard to live in New York. I had a friend that was doing an internship there. I had an aunt that was living in New Jersey. So I spent a summer with the two of them trying to figure out, you know, I had some savings. I was like, let me see if I can make it. There was a time in these 30 years that I was also an undocumented immigrant in this country. So some opportunities were not easy to access. I've never said that out loud, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I am a citizen of this country now, but there was a time in there that I had to figure that out too.
Yeah.
And when I went to New York, I was like, okay, I think I want to apply to a 4-year university. So I applied to UNC, and I said, if I get in, it means I need to finish school. And if I don't, then I'll move to New York. And that didn't happen. I got in. So I moved to Chapel Hill, and I was in Chapel Hill, and I studied art there. And it was beautiful. It was the first time that I was ever a full-time student in college when I was there. And so I took a break from working in restaurants as it was always a means to an end for me. You know, like I had to make a living. So I'm working in restaurants. I actually do well. I was a really good server for a long time. I became a really good bartender. So it was making me do these other things that I wanted to do. It was never like, I'm going to have a restaurant. It's like, this is helping me like make a living, help my mom, help my sister, buy a car, pay for college, travel some. And when I graduated from college, I decided to get married. And I was like, maybe I need to take a break. So I worked for the Broadway Series South office at the Raleigh Memorial Auditorium.
Okay, so you came back to Raleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And I think I did some PR work for them and watched a ton of Broadway shows and met some really awesome people.
How fun.
It was really great.
Wow.
And then I got pregnant and started to really think, okay, I need to do something that it's a little bit more sustainable, that I can actually build something that is going to have an impact in the way that my kids live their lives. So for me, I think that was like financial stability. So like, how can I do that? And that's when that actually kind of like came up. It's like, okay, what could I do? So I started a partnership with my uncle. That's when we bought the building, and that's when we opened Centro.
Okay.
But the offer was, I will do it if I have a stake on it. I don't want to just work here.
Right.
You know, when we finally opened, I had 2 kids under the age of 2.
Wow.
So it was like, if I'm going to do it, some of it needs to be mine.
How did you do it?
I don't know. Okay. There's a lot of blackout periods during that time.
Wow.
A lot of grit, you know, a lot of grit. And I think the will of like really creating something that was going to make a difference for them.
It's cool thinking about you doing it for your kids who, you know, have no idea, and you're doing everything for them. Was that negotiation was that a conversation with your uncle? Like, hey, I've got to have a stake in this?
Yeah. And so you know, we were able to do that.
And he obviously supported that.
He's always been super supportive. Before we opened the restaurant, he left. He went back to Colombia. And I was really left on my own to figure all of it out. And he was so trusting of it.
But with 2 young kids.
With 2 young kids. I mean, I had a husband, and he helped a lot.
Sure, but still.
It was a challenging time, and I think that I grew a lot. I learned a lot. I'm not sure that I would quite do it the same if I had a redo.
Who would, though, right? I mean, hindsight.
But I think there's some parts of it that I'm really, really grateful for.
And so when you went to your uncle to start it, was that the decision to open a second restaurant, or were there already plans for a second restaurant?
No, I think that he, you know, because he's such an entrepreneur, he had been looking for a lunch spot downtown. I think he was looking to see, okay, things are changing. There might be an opportunity to do really good lunch business here. So that was the first kind of like pitch. It's like, oh, there's this building. Oh, well, maybe, you know, and Centro was called Dos Taquitos Centro first. And some of it was, you know, we wanted to bring people from North Raleigh to downtown. But because he left to Colombia, I was on my own to figure out what the menu was going to look like. So I was like, well, I'm just going to do whatever I think I want to do. And that looked very different than the restaurant in North Raleigh. So 3 years in, we decided to rebrand into just Centro.
And when did Centro open?
September 27 of 2007.
Well, that's very close to this recording. So happy almost anniversary.
Thank you.
That's very exciting.
Thank you.
So you had worked in restaurants and had gained some experience, but you were always working for people. How did it change now that people were working for you?
I don't know that synced in for me like 3 years in. I think now I see the importance and the responsibility. I mean, I've had people that have worked for me for 12 years. I think that at the time, I was just really trying to build relationships so we could just make it, right? And I think the early things that I knew needed to happen, because I had worked in other restaurants, not just with my uncle, was that I wanted to create places where you could feel safe and you could feel heard, especially as a woman. So I think, I always try to do that. And I have all my kitchen is women.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Mm-hmm. What other things have shaped your leadership style?
I think that, inclusivity, diversity is something that is really important to me. I think that somebody that has influenced my leadership skills a lot is Brené Brown. I always go to her and study her work really, really hard just to be a helper, I am a helper. And I think that is how I can contribute to my staff. So I'm really available. I'm really, you can talk to me about anything that you need, and making sure that everybody is taken care of in all the different ways that people need. So I have long-standing relationships with a lot of my staff. But I've also learned to make space, to not have to be there all the time, and to trust them that they can do what we all agree to do together. So I think it's shifted over the years. At first it was like, okay, well, how do we do this? How do we do this? And then how do we do it together? And now how do I empower people to do what we together agree that needs to get done? So I don't have to do it. Because for me, my time with my kids now, it's prime priority, especially because when they were little, I could not be around.
I'm very curious when you talk about creating a safe space. I think you called it, I want to get your words right. There's a lot of discussion about the restaurant industry, how tough it can be on lifestyle. Even, here locally, we've had stories of restaurants not set up with safety in mind. But even without the worst stories, it just seems to be it can be a tough lifestyle to work in. Not asking your whole plan or for you to tell me everything, but are there specific examples where you worked in a restaurant and you were like, that wasn't a safe space for that employee or whatever, I'm going to do it differently? Like, is there something specific or an example of like how you intentionally made your restaurant a safe space for employees?
Well, I think that, give people, language is such an important thing, for an immigrant especially, like language is really an important thing. So how you communicate things, it's going to make a huge difference. And I think that in the past, I don't know if that happens anymore, but I think there was this understanding that it was okay to be abrasive and to be harsh and to be mean and to be just outright disrespectful to anybody that worked for you, just because it's a hard environment. Everybody's under a lot of stress. And you just don't know how to handle it. So it is okay to have an outburst of anger and be completely directed to anybody that works. And not just kitchen, but anybody. I've been there. I know how stressful sometimes a shift can be and how you can just lose your cool. But learning that there are better ways. And that if you don't learn how to control that, every time that there's an outburst, it will chip away at people's trust that you have their well-being in mind. And you can't just build relationships out of sorries and apologies. It needs to be a combination of, sometimes we mess up and you have to apologize and you have to do better. But for the most part, I can trust that you will always respect me and that you will, even when it's the hardest of the hardest, you will see me as a human being and just be kind and generous, right? So that, I think that's been the hardest thing to do. because there is this, or there was this understanding that it was okay to be an asshole.
Yeah.
And it's actually not okay to be an asshole, you know?
Never.
Because you don't want anybody to treat you that way.
Right.
So in the same, with the same grace, you should not treat people in that way, in that manner. So I think it's been like, okay, well, how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we do, and how do we do it every day? And how do we do it when it's hard, especially when it's hard? And you practice and you get good at it.
A little bit better every day.
A little bit better at it, yeah. And there's many times where it's been a shit.
Well, that happens too. Yeah, that's part of it. But then you do the repair and the apologies and you grow. So was that a day one thing for you when you kind of took over? Or was that something that as you sort of got the business running, you thought there are some ways we can improve this environment for everyone?
I think that I had worked in a kitchen before where we had a male chef that was just a really horrendous, screaming person. And I could tell how demoralizing that was always, and I sometimes was on his good side and his favorite. So I was not always at the brunt of his screaming matches. But I was like, we could never have that. We had a chef that we started with. Her name was Marta. And Marta was like the epitome of like grace. She was like the most loving, caring human. So she's always set the tone. Marta, unfortunately, was sick, and she passed away a year into us being open.
Oh, wow.
And we had a tricky year sort of after that. And then I decided, well, you know what? I'm going to take over the kitchen of the restaurant. So let's set the tone right again. So just kind of taking ownership for that part of it.
Wow. And so now when you do hiring, is it something that you kind of work on with people? Because these are skills that you're talking about, like emotional management and those sorts of things. Or is it something that you, kind of people have to have in order to join your team? Or
so I think that when I hire management now, I tend to meet with them often and meet their people, their partners, their significant other, just to kind of get an idea of who they are and what kind of relationships they have. If I bring them in, then I put them through a workbook study. I think they think that I'm nuts, but we do a workbook study on a book that is called Dare to Lead, where we talk a lot about, this is what happens when you get upset, and this is the language that we use, and these are all the tools, and like, how do you feel about this? And then we just kind of work through it, like, and we take about it's usually a month. And then we have weekly check-ins. We also do gratitude on every meeting that we have. So everybody has a moment to say what they're grateful for. So it just becomes this shared language that we have. I also don't tolerate gossip when it comes to work, which is a really difficult thing to manage. But it's like, you can't have it.
it's not healthy?
It's just not healthy. So like if it happens, it should not happen, but it's going to happen. So when it happens, it needs to be called upon. I say, hey, this is not a thing we do here. And even with all of that, there's drama, there's things, because humans are humans and people bring all their stuff that they come from home. And sometimes it's difficult. But I think that the language and the tone is always, hey, let's just... And I think like we don't strive for perfection. And I think that really allows people to be like, okay, it did not land, but it's okay. Everything's
We'll try
okay.
again tomorrow.
Everything's okay. So yeah, I don't know, just like little bits of a lot of things.
Yeah. But it feels like you've built a really strong and secure culture that you work really hard to protect and ensure that the people who join your team are equally as bought into it.
Yes. And sometimes, and even with that, we've had some really tricky situations come up. And to realize that not everybody is in a place where they can respect and honor that. And when that is not the case, then it's okay to say, hey, this might not be a place where you can work.
Yeah.
Quick stats. How many employees do you have?
So after COVID, we are about 20 between Centro and Gallo. Ex Voto in Durham, I believe we're up to 12.
And so Centro and Gallo Pelon are the same building.
They're in
but
the
you
same
consider
building.
them two different restaurants. I consider them two different restaurants.
They're two different operations because the offering is different.
Yeah. No, I consider them two different restaurants as a consumer, but I didn't just say, do you say 3 different restaurants?
Yeah, they're 3 different.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're 3 different offerings.
And when, again, just more nuts and bolts, you opened Centro in, we said 2007. When did you add Gallo Pelon?
Gallo Pelon we added in 2015.
And then what about the one in Durham?
Ex Voto opened 2020, May of 2020.
Whoa.
During the pandemic.
During the pandemic.
Weesh.
Yeah.
What was that like? How did you decide to press on, even though it was May of 2020?
Well, I mean, we had been working on it for 2 years.
Sure.
And some of the delays were due to construction. So the hall was scheduled to open April of 2020,
It's the Durham Food Hall, right?
the Durham Food Hall. And we were just, we're working towards that.
Yeah.
And then March of 2020 came. And, I have a business partner there. So we were like, okay, well, what do we do? Right? Like, it was him, it was our chef. They were ready to go. And we had been doing a year of pop-ups. I mean, they were ready to open this place. And we had some responsibilities to our agreement with the hall. So we all the tenants there worked with them at the time and said, okay, well, we can do the menu that we designed, not in the way that we intended it. I mean, because Ex Voto is not what we wanted. Ex Voto is a true child of the pandemic pivot. That's exactly what it is. So all the tacos, all the sets that we had for what we were going to do, we turned them into burritos because that was an operation that you could do with 2 people. We didn't have to use our cone grinder. We didn't have to do any of that because we didn't have the capacity to do it. And once we got into the hall and started working, like the space there is really limited. So like our dreams and hopes were like, that's not what this is. So we shifted it and did burritos. And I think fall of 2020 is when Marshall was like, why don't we do a crunch wrap? We could do the same sets as a crunch wrap. It'll be super fun. I'm like, you want to do a crunch wrap? Do a crunch wrap.
Yeah.
And now that is what we sell the most.
Wow.
So now, Ex Voto is a burrito. It's a crunch wrap burrito and bowl operation.
Born out of the pandemic.
Born out of the pandemic.
So it sounds like you have worked really intentionally to build the culture of your restaurants. You have grown it across different communities. So it feels like community has been an important part of it. When did the Day of the Dead race, the 5K, come to be? What was the origin story of that? So Day of the Dead is a Mexican holiday. So as a Colombian, I was never exposed to it. And there was a year, I think it was like first or second year, my kitchen staff asked. They're like, hey, can we set up an ofrenda? And I'm like, I don't know what an ofrenda is, but sure, what do you need?
You needed to take Spanish in American middle and high school. Dia de los Muertos, it's like a huge section. So if you had been in America, you would have known about that.
Yes, not me.
Yeah, no.
So they said, oh, we need flowers, we need this, we need that. And I said, sure. So I got them all the things. And then they made this beautiful ofrenda in the middle of the dining room. And to me, it was such a gift that they gave me because I had never seen one. I have never done one. And they asked for it. So it was something that they really wanted to do, that was filling some sort of need that they wanted. But to me, it was an opportunity to deal with some stuff that I needed to deal with. And I had not had like a space to do it. So they set up the first ofrenda for the first year. And then over the next few years, we did bigger ofrendas and we did some events around Day of the Dead. So we did, what did we do? We did a couple bike rides. So we asked people to come and dress up and go on a bike ride, and we would have like a buffet, and people would come, and it was kind of like we wanted to honor it, but we didn't really have a program set up. It's like, oh, let's just get together and do this. And for me, I wanted to honor my sister's memory because she had died in 2003. And I had never really dealt with the grief of her death because she committed suicide. So it was a really challenging thing to be with. So I just kind of put it away. And then when this ofrenda was presented, I was like, oh, this is something I can do to remember her, to move through this grief, to acknowledge it. And I want to share it. I want to share with other people. And she was a big rider, a bike rider. So that's why the bike ride was the first thing that we ever did. Yeah. And then we had so many people come. And the second year we did the bike ride, we did it on the day of the death, which I think it landed on a Friday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And all these people showed up with kids. We didn't have a permit. So we're riding through downtown Raleigh with all these kids. Everybody's dressed up. And I was like, this is not safe, you guys. We need a permit. So we started thinking, like, how do we reach more people? Like, how do we reach like hundreds of people? A 5K seemed like the next best thing. You know, it's more accessible. We can, ask for a permit, really plan through, close the streets, all that stuff. So that's why the 5K came to being, because we wanted to do something where we could have a bigger audience, not just to expose them to what the Day of the Dead was, but, we've always been a super active family, and my sister was a very active person. So it's like, how do we do something else that is also active and fun? And we had been also looking for a partner within the community, the Latin American community. And we met the director of the Boys and Girls Club, and he's Mexican, and he's this awesome guy. His name is Pepe Caudillo, and we just he kind of got it. He's like, yeah, let's do it. So we partnered with them, and they've been, our nonprofit for 10 years.
So something that came out of the space of the culture you created in your own restaurant space and making space for your employees to share what was important to them has now grown into this thing that benefits so much of our community. That's pretty incredible.
It's pretty fun.
Wow.
Where's the race?
So the race, it starts in front of the restaurant. So that's the 106 block of South Wilmington Street.
Yep.
And then we run down Morgan into Bloodworth, down Oakwood, and then into the cemetery. And we run about a mile inside the cemetery, and then we come back.
Makes sense.
So it's a 5K, it's a 3.1 mile.
Do you have to run? Because Oakwood's pretty hilly.
The comeback is really hilly. Yeah. And inside the cemetery, there's some hills. This is really a family event. So we encourage folks to train for it, but people walk it, run it. This is not a competitive race by any means.
Is it stroller friendly?
Yeah, it's super stroller friendly.
Dog friendly?
Dog friendly too. I think over the years it's become these other, things like anybody that you want to bring, bring them.
Yeah.
And people are like dress up for Day of the Dead, and they run the race in full costume. Well, I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah.
Because it's an easy, for a seasoned runner, a 5K, it's an easy distance. But yeah, it's a beautiful spectacle. It really is. It really is.
Do you run?
I am a runner. I am taking a little hiatus. I got injured earlier this year, and it's taking a while to heal. So I haven't run, but this is the first year I'm probably going to run the race in a few years, because I'm usually the MC of the race.
I was going to ask, you're probably busy most of the day. You probably don't get to run that often.
But I think this year the club is taking the race on. Mm-hmm. I gave them the race last year. And they're like, we got an MC. We got a DJ. I was like, okay, is there anything that I need to do? Like, I'll show up in full dress. And they're like, you should go run. And, one of the most beautiful outcomes of this race is seeing the kids from the club run the race. For them, it's become a thing that they do. So they train for it, and then they get bussed there. They all get their little shirts and their little bibs. And it's, we're talking about 6 to 18.
Okay. How many kids?
We usually have about 120 kids from the club run the race.
Okay.
And they're super excited. For some of them, this is the first 5K, like organized 5K that they ever run. And then they take off. And then as soon as they're coming back on Bloodworth, like that is the hill up Morgan, they are cheering each other on to finish strong. And that is just the best.
That's such a cool feeling.
It's the best. Yeah.
Wow. And so registration fees benefit the Boys and Girls Club.
Yes. So there's a schedule. I think that if you register before September 30th, you get a T-shirt. After September 30th, I think the price goes a little bit. So we pay all costs, and everything else that we collect goes to the club. So we have runners' fees, but we also do a lot of private fundraising for them.
So there's sponsorship opportunities available?
Yes. It's been interesting. Because we gave them the raise, I know that you're going to know a question, but I want to tell you something else that we're doing. Because we gave them a raise, it gave us a space to do something else at the cemetery. And for me, for years, I've been really wanting to like lean into the celebration of the Day of the Death. And we have been, since we've been running at the cemetery, which I don't know if you've ever met Robin, who's the executive director of the cemetery. Mm-mm. She's an incredible woman.
Good podcast. Yeah.
She's like a champion for life.
Yeah.
And she's the director of the cemetery.
Will you connect her so we can maybe have her on the podcast?
Oh my gosh, she's so awesome. So she asked us to run inside the cemetery first. And we were like, yeah, totally. And then she's like, anything else that you want to do here? We want you to do it. So we set up an ofrenda at the cemetery every year. And I think that for the last 6 years, people have been bringing things to this ofrenda.
Wow.
So like pictures and letters and flowers. And we save as much as we can and we set it up the next year. And for me, it's like such a ritual of like healing and, just like I get my kids to do it. I get my neighbors to do it. Like we all do it collectively and it's really beautiful. But we don't get a lot of people out to celebrate because there's all this stigma around death and like going to the cemetery at night. Like, are you crazy? Like, why are we doing this? So I've always seen that there's really a lot of work to do in that area. So when I gave the club the raise, I said, let's now focus on a Day of the Death festival. Not quite a festival, but like a celebration at the cemetery where we can have a really big ofrenda, but like a big one. And have other partners and have people come out and be there in celebration, if that's how they are feeling, or in memory, if that's how they are feeling. And let's bring food and let's bring music. Let's really let's really lean into what the actual celebration is about. So I reached out to Peter Marin. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's a local artist. He's from Mexico. He did the ofrenda when the Frida and Diego exhibit was at the North Carolina Art Museum.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you guys ever went to that show.
Yeah.
So when you walked in, there was a huge ofrenda to the left. He made that.
Okay.
So I was like, hey, Peter, how do we make a big, like, massive ofrenda? And, we'll get some money, we'll figure something out. And he's like, yeah, I'm in. So we've been working for a year, and we're doing 3 days in the cemetery. We're calling it Dia de Oakwood. And he's creating actually like an art installation theme around Day of the Death.
I feel like we buried the lead a little bit here. This is exciting.
It is going to be really great. So we're having an inaugural day where the Consulate of Mexico is coming, and we're going to have like traditional Mexican music and food and 2 big ofrendas that he's setting up. So we've been making paper flowers for the last month because we need like 3,000 of them. We're having a master artist in Mexico cutting paper for the ofrendas. And then we've partnered with people within the community to have little ofrendas. So we're going to have this massive like ofrenda city in the cemetery for people to just like come and be in the spirit of this holiday.
And what are the dates this year?
It's October 27, inaugural. October 29, we're showing Coco for the kids. And November 2nd, which is Dia de Muertos, we'll have like a Catrina parade. We're having kids dress up and But the installation will be open from the 27th to the 2nd.
Wow.
And all of it's in Oakwood Cemetery?
All of it's in Oakwood. So if you've ever been there, the main entrance, there's a field to the right. So we're taking over that whole field. So we're gonna have a stage there for dancers and presenters. And then the two ofrendas are gonna anchor the field on each side. And then these little ones are gonna be in the middle. And then we're gonna light it up and yeah, so.
We didn't do great on the first website, but is there a place where we can find people can find out more information on this one? Is this at Centro's website?
There's an Instagram. There's not a website.
Gotcha.
There's an Instagram thing called Dia de Oakwood.
Dia de Oakwood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll have to check that out for sure. That's really
Obviously, you liked the race and it was cool. It seems to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you were really looking for something to channel, whether it was personal in you or what you saw personal about your staff. This seems like the race was good, but I wanted to be a little bit closer to an actual Dia de los Muertos ceremony, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the race is taken a life of its own, right? Like it serves the club. We've been able to raise like $170,000 for them. It's part of their yearly budget. The kids look forward to it. Like it's a thing we created and now it lives on its own. I felt like the club really needed to take it and we will always champion for it. You know, like I'm a runner, my kids are runners. You know, like it is a thing that we will always do. But through the years, what has really been calling me like a little tug is like, we really need to create a bigger platform for the celebration. And the way to do it is to really focus in the traditional aspects of the celebration so people can feel more comfortable and safe around it.
Yeah, because I think that's what's interesting for me is that I can see where the race over the years may have moved away from the core sense of that. It's an incredible thing. It's raising a ton of money, but the need to get back to that and to bring people into that tradition and to be able to do it at Oakwood sounds like a really fun thing to do.
This is an observation more than a question. I asked you earlier about how do you create safe spaces for your employees. I imagine one of the things that the ones who were with you at the time would say, well, she knew nothing about this tradition that was important to us and embraced it to the point that now it's a huge part of her life. Like, I can't think of a better example of an employee being like, well, this is a person who obviously cares about me, right?
Yeah.
They're giving me space to bring my tradition, which also is connection to family and stuff. So very cool. And I wish nothing but the best of success for the first Dia de Oakwood. And I'm betting it'll have as good, if not better life than the race you started. I think this is gonna be a really cool thing.
You know, it's I'm really curious. We were able to get some funding from the city. We got a couple grants and a little bit of private funding. But I'm really curious to see it come to life, you know? And we'll see, you know, I think that everybody that is involved in it really wants this to be a yearly tradition. Like there hasn't really been anything that can include our Latin American family to like our community, where it's something that it's really theirs to celebrate. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm really hopeful that this will be really special. I'm
betting it goes well and will be a yearly tradition. All right, pivoting a little bit. There's a lot of talk about downtown Raleigh right now. Mm-hmm. From the Downtown Raleigh Alliance, they do their state of downtown every now and then. I'm putting you in charge of a state of downtown address, but specifically through the lens of a small business and or restaurant owner. What's the state of downtown look like for you right now, someone who operates a successful restaurant there? So in September of 2023, I would say that we as a business still are feeling the effects of what happened in 2020. Because 2020 was not just comprised of COVID and the shutdown of COVID, but for us specifically were the riots that happened in May. And, you know, I really believe that safety lives in our subconscious, like the knowing of safety lives in our subconscious. And I think that's something that we haven't quite been able to turn around yet. So I feel safe downtown Raleigh because I go there every day. That's where I work. That's where, you know, like I inhabit, you know, most of my days are spent there. But for folks that are not coming to downtown Raleigh, often I think there is a sense of lack of safety still. You know, I think that what having
aborted downtown Raleigh for over a year. That does something to your subconscious, So I think that we're still feeling some of that. I think that there's some places within the city where it feels a little dirtier. We see a lot more people in the streets that don't have a home to inhabit. And I think all of those things are adding to that sense of safety. And, people want to go downtown to live, play, and have fun, right? So, that doesn't kind of align with that brand. And it took a long time to build that. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it for 30 years. Yeah. And then I've been a participant of it for the last 16 years. And unfortunately, we live in a society where we want everything to be instant gratification, and some things just take time, So I think that the call is for folks to come downtown, to trust that it will be fine, and that everybody that is in downtown is working hard to turn this thing around. And we need to, give it time and continue to stay on it.
Rah, rah. I support that. Yeah. You mentioned when you were talking about the new event this year, creating opportunities to bring the Latin American community to the family together in this area. How do you think Raleigh could be a better city for immigrants?
All we ever want is to be included, right? As an immigrant, regardless of your background, there's all these things that you need to overcome. Language is one, learning systems, places, how to get around. It's another one. And then we're just trying to fit in. And sometimes it's impossible because you look so different that you can't just really fit in. So to my fellow immigrants, it's it is okay to embrace to be different. That actually adds value to who you are. I think to the city, there's so much that we could do. I think that having accessibility to things that are important in various languages is really, really necessary. And I don't know that is there, whether it's for lack of resources or lack of acknowledgement. But, applications, when you apply to get your water for your place, all that should be accessible in as many languages as possible. And I know it's a big restructure and is, going to take some investment, but that is a way to make people feel comfortable and seen and welcomed. I don't think that we have enough services for folks that are brand new to the city, whether they're migrating from other cities.
Tell me more. What services, I think, and recognizing that I'm never going to know what that journey is like, what services do you feel like we could have or should have?
I mean, I think, if we were to think about it from a beginner's, mind and be curious, what would I want to have when I come to a city? I would love a Raleigh 101, right? In all the languages possible, and have an ambassador that it's doing that for everybody that is new to the city, whether you are moving from California or you're moving from Iraq. This is where everything is. These are the grocery stores. This is the bus transportation. This is the bus schedule. This is our convention center. This is the theater. Not just the basic services that you need to get by, but this is how you can have fun in the city. How would we want to show up our city to newcomers is what I would want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that the city could totally create an office this is our ambassador office. Raleigh Downtown Alliance could also be chipping in. These are all the events that we have in the city, and this is all that it's free, and this is all that is not free. I remember being an immigrant the first few years here and using the Ex Spectator, which is no longer a published thing, and the Indie as the sources for things to do. But it would require for me to sit there and really look through things and try to figure. And again, this is no cell phones, no GPS, no Siri, no nothing.
And you came with a pretty good level of English, it sounds like, which makes a big difference too.
Yeah, and back then, there was not a lot of access to information unless it was in English otherwise. So I would say something like that, you know?
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. It's just interesting to kind of, I know I've been reading that you spend you're spending more of your energy now focusing on telling your own immigrant story and how to support immigrants in our community. And so appreciate hearing that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What gets you more excited? Trying a new recipe, making something new for the first time, or making like an old favorite that you've made a million times, but you know you love it?
I think it depends. I love the comfort that it gives you to try something that you love, you know?
Yeah.
And to be able to share that with somebody for the first time.
Do you have a favorite thing to make then?
I mean, I love moles. I think the mole that we have at the restaurant is one of the best ones in the city. It's a labor of love, you know. It takes a while, and if you make it at home, your home is going to smell like, you know, smoked chilies and smoked spices for 2 weeks.
Wonderful.
The kids are not always super excited about that. I also cook a lot of Colombian food at home that the kids really love.
All right, staying on similar topic. I was eating at Oakwood Pizza Box not too long ago, and a shipment of basil came in, and Anthony was like, "Yeah, I get my basil from Hawaii." And I was like, "What? Like, why?" And he's like, "It's the best basil, so I get it there." Do you have any good stories of, I only get this ingredient from this one place, whether it's local or from another planet?
I was thinking about that, and I think that the best stories these days are when staff bring something that they really wanted, that they grew, and they make staff meal with it.
Very cool.
So this past week, and I don't always have staff meal with them because I'm either in or out, but I always check to see what I make. Maybe I want some of that. So this past week, as I was leaving, and because it was a colder week, they made soup.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this green soup that they made? I mean, it's like vibrant green. So I thought maybe they made green mole or green pozole or, you know, something like that. I was like, I definitely want to have some of that before I leave. And they're like, what is it that you guys made? And they're like, we just made caldo de pollo, so chicken soup, but somebody brought fresh epazote that they just grew in the garden, and they just had way too much. And they made chicken soup with green epazote. And I don't know if you ever had epazote. Epazote is like this really pungent herb. It looks a little bit like cilantro, but it's maybe whiter leaves, whiter, crazier leaves. But it's a really interesting flavor. It's really, really pungent. Not for everybody. But they just, you know, they made this delicious. It was delicious. It was hearty. Yeah. So things like that.
That's wonderful.
How often is staff meal?
Every day.
Daily staff meal.
Yeah. What time is that? How do I get it now?
Yeah, what time should I be walking by accident?
4:30.
Get those good smells.
Yeah.
So you studied art and art history at UNC.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still create art in the traditional sense?
I've been trying to make space for it. I think it's something that I've been needing to do more often. This project that we have for the Day of the Dead is giving me a little bit of opportunity to do that in a way. And I try to volunteer anytime I can to like go paint whatever, you know. I'm like, yeah. But I think that I hope that in the future I have more space for more intentional creation of art in my life.
I've got one last question. Do you have any more?
Go ahead.
Mine has to be the last one though. So
all right. I was going to ask, so what other things do you do for fun? Unless that was your last
No.
question. Okay.
I've got a better last one. I've been saving it. I was hoping it didn't come up, and now I'm like, I'm going to close this thing out right.
Yeah.
So this thing that I've been doing this season was I've taken over the Enloe High School concession stand.
Oh, fun.
And it's been fun because one of my kids is a soccer player. And for the last 2 years, I've been really concerned about the options at the concession stand. So I've been like, hey, can we do something about it?
I know a thing or two.
And they're like, and you know, it's busy. Nobody has time. So last season, I was like, let me just try just a few things. So we as parents have something to eat for the games. And the kids could benefit also from having more options than just soda and candy. Like, that's easy. finally they said, okay, you can do whatever you want. It's like, okay. I did not know what I was signing up for. I'd never been to a football game in my life at a high school.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never had the need to because I was either working or doing something else. But now that I have time, I've been going to all the soccer games because Hada's playing soccer. They're like, you don't know how busy like our football games are. I'm like, yeah, I do not know. But I feel like I can handle it.
Right. Got a little
For a
experience.
restaurant, like, I know busy.
I know volume. So I've been doing that, and it's been fun, and it's been interesting. And we're feeding people other things that are not food and that are not candy and soda.
Chicken soup with a mole.
With epazote.
Epazote, yeah. You throwing that at them?
We're giving, we've added concession like food. So there's hot dogs, there's burgers, there's grilled cheese, there's turkey wraps. There's chicken bowls, not for all the games, but for some of the games. So there's lots of options. We trimmed their candy selection and their soda selection. So that's been fun. What's been really great about it is that for the first, my kids are seniors in high school. So the first few years, they're like, do not volunteer for anything at school. We do not want to see you there. I was like, okay. I won't. Yeah. I'll stay away.
Oh.
But with soccer, like I was bringing food for the team. It's like, just a little bit. Let me just do a little bit. Like these are I'm not doing something that I don't know how to do. So I said, hey, is this okay for me to do? You don't have to do anything. They're like, it's okay for you to do. And now they're like, can we volunteer with you? And one of them is really interested in the whole setup as a business. So because she wants to study business. So she's like, well, how do we set up the prices? And how do we figure out the cost? And let's look at the reports. And now both of them are in there with me all the time.
Wow.
Which was completely unexpected. And these being their senior year, it was like, okay, this is a plus that I'd totally take.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it's been really
I love
great.
that.
Yeah.
Also, feels like we should swing by an Enloe football game.
All right, lead up to the final question. You didn't get in college, and that started a completely different path of life. This led you where you are now. Do you ever think about what if you got in college?
I have been thinking about it because, as I mentioned earlier, this is my 30-year reunion. We've never had a reunion.
Oh, wow.
And somehow this year, a group of the graduates were like, hey, we really need to get together this year. It's like 30 years. And they got this WhatsApp chat.
Sure.
With over 100 of the folks
God.
that graduated. I think it was like 120 that graduated, and there's like over 100 people that from all over the world, because everybody's spread across the world. It's like, hey, should we get together? And it's been like a year of back and forth. And it's really made me consider, like, what would life look like if I had stayed home? It certainly would not look like what it looks like for me here.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for my friends that stayed home, that have done well. But I would say 60% of our graduating class left the country. Mm. And they're either in Europe or in the States or in Asia. Because we grew up, we graduated in the 90s. And the 90s was a really hard time in Colombia. So I don't know. But I'm going to go see at least 40 of them in November.
Well,
You're going back to Colombia for that?
Yeah.
Whoa, that'll be fun.
Yeah.
final question, it's somewhat related. What happened to the boy? You said you were dating a guy, that's why you did it in college, and then you moved to Raleigh. What happened to him?
He lives in Montreal with his wife, and they have 4 kids.
Love
Are
that.
they coming? Is he coming back to the
He
reunion?
was not in my school.
Okay.
He was in another school.
Well, he's a
But
part
he's
two to this
actually
episode. We're
he
shaping up here.
stopped by with his wife and his kids last summer, because they were driving to Disney
Oh, wow.
from Montreal.
And they stopped in Raleigh?
And he said, hey, we're going to be in North Carolina. I'm like, you should totally stay here. So I was able to house them, and we had a meal together. is really special.
That's really neat. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
A happy ending for everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I was curious when you were like, yeah, there was a boy that kept me from getting college, and then I just left to Raleigh, and I'm like, well, what happened to the boy?
We've stayed in touch
Well, good.
for the last 30 years.
Well, thanks for all the delicious food and amazing things you are doing in our community.
Thank you.
And for taking the time to talk to us about it today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So
Can't wait to see Dia de Oakwood.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It'll be fun.
I'm
Thanks so
excited
much
to
for
check
the
that
time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Podcast Raleigh. Review us on your favorite podcast app. If you like this episode, share it with a friend.